Here's a tiny example of plain song in the Dorian mode. Isn't that beautiful? And I bet you didn't know they could sing too, did you? You've just witnessed the debut of a great new glee club. Anyway, that music is in the Dorian mode. It uses exactly the same scale, the same arrangement of intervals as Debussy used in his Fête. But what is this scale? Well, that's easy. To find the Dorian mode on your piano, all you have to do is start on the note D and play only white notes all the way up to the next D. And you've got it. Simple. And that's true of all the other church modes as well, by the way. They're all to be found by starting on a given white note and making a scale up using white notes only. Isn't that lucky? And we're particularly lucky with the Dorian mode because it starts on D, and D is the first letter of the word Dorian. So you have no excuse for forgetting how to find this mode on your piano. Dorian, capital D, note D, white notes all the way up, and voila. Now, here's another piece in the Dorian mode. I wonder if you know this one. Every time I think that I'm the only one who's lonely, someone calls on me. And every now and then I spend my time with rhyme and verse and curse the fault in me. And then along comes Mary. Along comes Mary in the ancient and honorable Dorian mode. The same mode we just heard in Debussy and in the plain chant. Now, who'd have thunk it? What is that old Greek mode doing in today's pop music? Well, I'll tell you. From about the time of Bach until the beginning of our own century, roughly 200 years, our Western music has been based almost exclusively on only two modes, the major and the minor. I can't go into the whys and wherefores of it now, but it's true. And since most of the music we hear in concerts today was written during that 200-year period, we get to think that major and minor modes are all there are. But the history of music is much longer than a mere 200 years. There was an awful lot of music sung and played before Bach, using all kinds of other modes. And in the music of our own century, when composers have gotten tired of being stuck with major and minor all the time, there's been a big revival of those old pre-Bach modes. And that's why Debussy used them so much, and other modern composers like Hindemith and Stravinsky, and almost all the young songwriters of today's exciting pop music scene. The modes have provided them with a fresh sound, a relief from the old overused major and minor. For instance, if that swinging opening of Along Comes Mary had been written in the usual everyday minor mode, it would sound like this. Sort of square, isn't it? Ordinary. But this has a kick in it, and that kick is Dorian. You can see that this Dorian mode is almost like an ordinary minor mode, but not quite. And that not quite is what makes the difference. And that difference gives the music a certain ancient, primitive, oriental feeling. That's why the plain chant we heard before is so stirring, so ancient as to seem timeless. And that's why the tune in Debussy's Fête seems so exotic and of another age. And that's why Along Comes Mary sounds so primitive and earthy. Now, by way of contrast, listen to this opening section of Sibelius' Sixth Symphony, which is also in the Dorian mode, and see if you can feel again that same timeless, brooding, ancient, far-off quality, only this time coming from the remote, lonely forests of Finland. see what I mean by the special feeling of the Dorian mode? Are you beginning to get the sound of it in your ears? Well, let's get technical just for a minute and find out exactly what it is that gives us this feeling. As we know, this Dorian mode is practically like the usual minor mode with one very big difference. In the minor mode, the seventh note is called the leading tone because it leads us home to the keynote or tonic, which is D. And that leading tone leads us to the tonic by the smallest possible interval, namely a half tone. You see? Amen. It's as though that leading tone were in love with the tonic and were pulled toward it, wants to embrace it, it wants to get there. And it does. But in the Dorian mode, where the seventh note is a half tone lower, there's a full whole step between it and the tonic. So it just doesn't seem to lead as strongly. It's not in love with the tonic. It's friendly enough, but it just wants to shake hands. You feel how formal, how strange and modal that sounds, that amen? The minute we hear that amen, we feel behind it the weight of many centuries of a different, older, more Eastern culture. Bach never wrote an amen like that, and neither did Beethoven or Brahms. But in our own century, it gets written all the time. For example, this. Secret aged man, secret aged man. Well, that's no amen, of course. But musically, it's exactly the same idea. You see? Well, that's an awful lot about the Dorian mode, which, may you never forget, as long as you live, starts on D, right?